Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of Raising Healthy Mothers. Today's episode is for my fellow exhausted, burnt out moms who feel like dinner is just another mountain to climb every single day. I'm going to share the secret to stress-free dinners, the way I have managed them to get them on the table under 30 minutes without burning out, basically. Spoiler alert, it's not about planning unrealistic gourmet meals or spending like your whole Sunday batch prepping for hours. Now, if you're new here and you haven't actually come across me before, and this is the first episode you're listening to, I am Tasha De Cruz, and I am a mum of a nearly 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I know exactly what it feels like to juggle work, kids, and an endless to-do list while still trying to figure out what on earth to feed everyone for dinner, especially if you have a fussy eater. And I thought this week I would share, I guess, a story from something that happened very recently when it comes to meal planning and cooking, and how I made dinner time manageable during a pretty chaotic week. And I'm going to bust a couple of meal planning myths and give you 3 easy, actionable tips to make dinner less stressful, hopefully starting tonight. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you about a resource that I have been working on over the last month or so that is designed to make meal planning so much easier for busy mums like us. So stick around, it's really going to be a good one. So let me set the scene. It was one of those weeks where everything felt really hard. The kids had brought back-to-back colds home. My daughter had been up all night with a cough. I had some deadlines that I had to meet. And I barely had any time between stopping work, picking up the kids, cooking dinner. And then trying to decide what to cook on the fly was just so exhausting. One more decision to make at that point of the day when I had decision fatigue. Oh, hang on a minute. I've just described the last couple of weeks as I've been writing this meal planning guide. It's been really interesting, actually, because I have had to really put to work the stuff that I'm writing about in the guide, because I'm really full on trying to write that guide in time while working a 3-day week around school hours, around clients, around, recording a podcast and all the other things that come with running your own business. So, I know what it's like. I genuinely know. I've been living it the last couple of weeks of when you've got no time at all. And it wasn't very long ago that I used to freeze in moments like this. I have quite a fussy eater in my children, and it was always really hard work. And to be honest, soul destroying to have to think about how to accommodate him as well as everyone else into the meal planning thing. But what I have found in the last few weeks is that really leaning into something that I guess I only really started quite recently, just a few months ago, which was meal planning, but not really how you think meal planning is. So don't roll your eyes. Let me explain. I am not talking about the kind of meal planning where you write out 7 recipes that you're going to make for the week and then, maybe spend your whole Sunday prepping for them. And then you kind of get to Wednesday and you're like, I just don't really want to eat that. And also I'm quite tired of cooking from scratch every single day. And it's taking way longer than I think it does, way longer than the recipe says it will. No, what I'm talking about is choosing a couple of flexible ideas and working with what you've got and repurposing leftovers. I hate the idea of a rigid meal plan because what if I don't feel like cooking that thing that day? And what I also found with very rigid meal plans, this is ones that I've written for my clients, for my resets, but also ones that I found on the internet, is that when you have a different meal for every single day of the week, that's quite a lot of food. And then you have all this leftovers, which is great because you can have it for lunch, right? But then you just end up having lots and lots and lots of food. And that just doesn't really work for me. And I realized that what I am very good at is repurposing leftovers, using up leftovers in a different and imaginative way so that it kind of makes a whole completely different meal from the one that you originally had. And for me, the secret is that it always starts with a roast dinner, a roast meat cooked on a Sunday. For me, leftover meat is like magic. It gives me a lovely blank canvas. And from that, I can cook endless different variations of different meals. So just to kind of illustrate this as an example, last week, my husband is in charge of roast dinners. It has become our routine that on a Sunday, he will decide that what meat to cook and he will cook it. And he's getting really, really good at it. So he made roast pork for Sunday dinner that week. Monday is a full work day for me. I finish when I go and pick up my son at 5 o'clock. So it's not a lot of time after picking him up and getting home and getting dinner. I like to try and aim to eat by 6 o'clock, right? 6:30 really. So on a Monday, it's usually a quick meal for us. So on that day, on that week in particular, I actually made a one-pot pasta meal for the adults, and I made like a separate plain pasta for the kids. Okay, so I didn't use up the roast meat on that day, but I did lean into the really fast way of cooking pasta, where you just chuck everything in a pot, turn it on, and it's kind of cooked after 15 minutes or so. It's amazing. And as it happens, actually, that on that day, one of my kids actually decided to try the saucy pasta, and she loved it. She completely ignored her plain pasta. So, obviously the really fussy one stayed in his, plain spaghetti lane, but that's fine, because as I always say, when it comes to fussy eating, it's always about the bigger picture, not the individual meal and what they have or haven't eaten. Anyway, on Tuesday, I did use up some of that meat. I ground up some herbs and some aromatic, and I made a Thai green curry from scratch with the leftover pork and some shiitake mushrooms as well. I served it with rice, and I had a side soup with noodles, because I know that's what my fussy eater would eat. I always plan on having a soup every week anyway. I think it's a really useful, helpful thing to have to hand. And when I'm pressed for time, I will reach for a jar of a sauce that I keep in the freezer. And I like to kind of rotate my sauces, but that week in particular, I had the mini veg sauce, which is where you kind of chuck a whole load of different vegetables with a tin of tomatoes, cook it for absolutely ages. And it's a really delicious sauce that you can use as a base for pasta, lasagna, for soups, for stews. And in this case, when it comes to the soup, I thinned it out with some stock, and I added a jar of chickpeas. And literally in 5 minutes, I had a meal that I could eat really, really quickly. And then the final bits of the pork from the roast that I did on Sunday, I marinated in a Greek-style marinade, stuffed it in a homemade cheese pizza with dill, garlic, yogurt, and a kind of cucumber tomato salad. Such a simple meal, so delicious. Everything was made from scratch, including the pita bread, so I knew exactly what went into them. And that means I'd used the pork 3 different ways. And if I had even more leftover pork, there would be so many other ideas I would have had for it. Friday is usually movie night in our house, so we tend to have pizza. And we will either get something from a shop, or I will make one using a frozen base that I make, once or twice a month. I will cook up a whole load of flatbreads and put them in the freezer so they're ready to make pizza. So the food that I tend to cook in this way uses the concept of just having some really delicious but simple spice mixes and marinades using bold spices, herbs and aromatics that ends up making really quickly cooked, simple meals just taste amazing. And when you have a cheat sheet of these spice mixes and marinades, it really helps to cut down time, because when it comes to the day, when I know I need to cook something, rather than kind of looking at my meal plan and thinking, I've got this in there, I'd better make that. I think, well, actually, what do I feel like eating? In my mind, when I planned the meals for that week, I was going to make a completely different pork curry, a vindaloo curry. But actually, I decided, no, I want to make something that's fresh, something herby, and that's why I ended up making the Thai curry instead. So being able to react to that, using that concept of having marinades is just much more suitable to my brain, to just the fact that I like having that flexibility. As long as I know where I want to go with my flavours, I don't need to spend time looking at specific recipes, because I have those concepts of the spice mixes and the marinades in my mind. And I really genuinely think being able to start with that leftover meat is an absolute godsend, because it's halfway done. Your meat is halfway cooked. You don't have to wait for that cooking time. So it really cuts down on that time massively. And knowing how to turn those leftovers into new and exciting meals is so empowering, because in my opinion there is nothing worse than dry reheated roast dinner. There is actually a really great way that you can reheat roast dinner in a way that doesn't end up with really dry meat, but that is something I do talk about in my meal planning guide. And then finally, having these big batches of sauces in portion sizes in the freezer that can be turned into lots of different meals is also really helpful, because the sauces I use are made from vegetables. So immediately I have this really easy way to increase the nutrient density of my meals and add loads and loads of flavour with very little effort. So if it is one of those days when I just don't feel like cooking, I can whip one of those sauces out, thin it out with some stock and make a soup. And I don't have to spend ages chopping up vegetables because I've already done that. And from what I can see, I think there are two big myths about meal planning that come up. So the first one is that it takes too much time. And actually, I think it's like a lot of things, isn't it? Meal planning is a time saver, but you have to spend that time up front. Because if you spend half an hour once a week just thinking through, where are we going to be this week? What kind of meals are we going to need? Are we going to need quick ones? Can we have from scratch meals? Are we going to need to pull something out of the freezer? It just means that it's going to save you from spending 10 minutes staring at the fridge, feeling like there's nothing in there, that it's completely empty, you just don't know what to cook. Whereas when I just allow myself to spend that time, it just means on the day when I need to cook dinner, I don't have to do too much thinking. And knowing that actually preparing a meal is going to take you 30 minutes of less can take so much pressure off, because it can be so exhausting to get to 5 o'clock and think, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to cook at all. I have nothing in the fridge, I have nothing planned, and I don't have kind of ready-made ingredients. So I know this meal is going to take me 45 minutes. I might as well get the fish fingers out of the freezer. And I know there's nothing wrong with fish fingers, right? But I know you want to do the best for your children, and I know you don't want to feed them fish fingers every single night. And then the second myth really is that meal planning ends up leading to really boring meals. I really don't think so. As I said, I don't like that rigidity of meal planning. So my focus is on making these really flexible meals rather than strict recipes, and then use my taste buds on the day to guide me. And then also thinking about how much time do I want to spend cooking. And that is going to help me produce these meals that are definitely not boring. They are definitely, repurposed meals from, a meal that I've had earlier in the week, but it's something completely different. So it doesn't feel like I'm just, having the same meal 3 times running. Because that's the other thing I can't stand. I can't stand it when people say, do this big batch cook and then eat this 3 times. I'm like, what? I do not want to eat stew 3 times this week. And I promised that I would end this episode with 3 quick tips for stress-free dinners. So here they are. Tip number 1, if you struggle to come up with meal ideas, pick a meal type or a theme for each night of the week. So things like you could have a stir fry on Mondays, you could have pasta on Tuesdays, you could have the tray bakes on Wednesdays. So it helps to narrow down the options while really still giving you like a wide range. Like when you think about stir fry, right, it's not just noodles and vegetables and sauce, stir fry sauce. It could also be like fajitas. That essentially is a stir fry, guys. You just wrap it in a tortilla rather than having it with rice or noodles, right? There are stir fry varieties all over the world. It's just about thinking about what they are and thinking about what your taste buds are. I call these quick meals, and in my meal planning guide I give you loads of ideas on what these quick meals could be. So yes, stir fries, yes, fajitas, yes, making your meat, marinating them and making them lovely and crispy as well, reheating them. Or you could also theme your nights according to cuisine. So you might have Mexican Monday, you might have Japanese Tuesday, you might have Indian Wednesday, and so on. I actually don't do any of those because, as I said, I like to have that flexibility. I like to feel that if I didn't feel like, whatever, Mexican on a Monday, I can have something completely different. So I do plan to, or have in mind that I will have a couple of quick meals, things like stir fries and pastas for those days when I know I'm not going to want to spend a lot of time. So for me, when my husband works from the office, and I've got the kids on my own, it's much, much harder for me to cook dinner without being distracted or disturbed. So I know on those days I need to make something really, really quick. And then I always like to have a couple of simmered meals, things like curries or stews. They might not necessarily take like a lot longer because, as I said, I start with cooked meat, or I kind of use beans and pulses to kind of produce things really quickly. But they tend to be a little bit more hands off. So that means I can really make sure I can tidy up the kitchen as I'm cooking, so I don't come back after dinner to an absolute disaster zone. Or I can have a dance party with my daughter while I'm cooking, or, watch a David Attenborough while I'm washing up with my son. So, just making sure that the meals are going to suit the demands of that particular day. And then in the cooler weather, now that it's, we're looking at winter, I plan to have at least one soup a week. I think they're just so brilliant for quick lunches, but obviously for dinners as well, especially if your children eat soup. My fussy eater does not eat soup, unless it's a clear soup. Actually, he does like a noodle soup. But no matter whatever I make, I always hope there's going to be leftovers, because I can have that for lunch, or often we might get to the end of the week and I'll be like, oh, we've got a fridge full of leftovers. So we will, I might amalgamate them into something like a brand new meal that tastes completely different, or we might just have a use up the fridge day and just everyone gets to eat whatever they feel like from the leftovers that we have there. My second tip is to really use that concept of having a base ingredient. The roast meats from the roast dinners. A big tray of roasted vegetables are so brilliant for making lots and lots of meals out of them. Or having a pre-prepared grain, whether that is cooking up a big batch of rice or cooking up a big batch of quinoa, or having packaged cooked grains as well in the cupboard as store cupboard essentials. And then you can plan 2 or 3 meals around those base ingredients. So, again, if you don't like being rigid about it, you can just have a few ideas in mind. So, for example, with the roasted vegetables, I might think about making a lentil soup on one of the days. I might make a beanie bolognese another of the days. Or I might make a bubble and squeak type meal, where I refry all of those vegetables and top it up with an egg. There are so many things you can do when you have a big base ingredient to start with. It just helps you to, rather than think about a specific meal, it just helps you to think about what can I do starting with this already cooked ingredients, because as I said, it halves the cooking time. And when you get used to thinking about using leftovers and repurposing them into meals, the options are genuinely endless. And in the meal planning guide, I talk about at great length the different ways that you can repurpose meals and use up leftovers, or just kind of start with these base ingredients and make lots and lots of meals out of them. And then my third tip is to really get an understanding of flavor pairing and have flavor boosters to hand. So that's things like having lovely spice mixes, whether you make them yourself or you buy pre-made spice mixes. Maybe you might make a lovely pesto, or even hummus, or a garlicky yogurt, or just having, knowing some really simple stir fry marinades and sauces. These are the little things that make basic ingredients taste amazing. Knowing what flavors pair well together and how to use them is literally the magic to cooking good food at home. Like, honestly, what makes a chef is just the fact that they know how to combine ingredients. If nothing else, just remember this one combination, the simplicity of lemon, garlic, salt, more than you think, and olive oil. Keep those in mind for most meats and vegetables, and you really can't go far wrong. And if you're vegetarian and you're thinking, well, this could never work for me because I don't obviously have like big batches of roast meats, don't worry, I have you covered in the guide. So I really hope these tips help you to feel a little bit more in control of dinner this week, and maybe even tonight. And if you want to dive deeper into this way of meal planning, as I said, I have created a guide for mums just like us, busy, tired, in demand, tired of making decisions. I've called the guide Dinner on the Table 30-minute meals that you actually have time for. And it's packed with quick, flexible ideas to make meal planning simple and stress-free. You'll find templates, meal ideas, and even spice mix and marinade charts to help you get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less, even on your busiest days. And to help you get going, I have written a 6-week meal plan. I have done the work for you. So using 6 different roast dinners, actually 5 different roast dinners as a starting point, repurposing them as leftovers, and then as well as using ideas based on my secret veg sources and recipe formulas. And I say it's based on 5 roast dinners because there is one week where you do not start with a roast dinner, and I show you how you can still use the same concept to make a whole meal plan. As I said, if you're vegetarian and you think, oh, this is clearly not right for me because it's all about meat, it's really not. Actually, most of the recipes are not meat-based. There is a whole week of vegetarian meals where I start with a vegetarian nut roast as a base. And almost all of the recipes have alternative suggestions where you can bulk them up with vegetarian options or swap them completely to make the whole meal vegetarian. I am not about rigid recipes. I am about making recipes work for you. And you can always make adaptations to make them suit you and your lifestyle and what you have in your fridge and your cupboard. So whenever I, need to make more than, say, like the leftover food that I have, almost always I will add a tin of beans or pulses or chickpeas or something. So really the premise is the same. Cooking is not some kind of scary thing. It's just about developing that intuitive way of knowing what to do with the ingredients that you have. So the guide officially launches on Tuesday 26th of November, but I am giving anyone on my waitlist early access on Friday the 22nd of November at an early bird discount. So if you know that this guide is going to change your life, and I think it will, then you need to join the waitlist at tashadacruz.com/waitlist. It is going to be available to you if you're on the waitlist this Friday, which means that you will have the weekend to actually write that plan. So if you're listening to this as the episode goes live on Wednesday the 20th of November, then you will get that early bird discount. If you have any questions about the guide, or you're not sure, or if you want to share your own meal planning wins, I would love to hear it. So hop on over to Instagram. I'm at @tashdacruz. Send me a message and let's keep this conversation going. I hope you found this episode helpful. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.